got it. Sexual violence and religious communities. The Netherlands-Indonesia Consortium was founded based on the idea that Netherlands and Indonesia share a common history. Whatever we think about that history, all conflicts and ambiguities of that history, but nevertheless we share a common history. And the idea behind the consortium is that because of this joint history, both countries the people who live in those countries can learn from each other. And maybe after hearing the short introduction by Jus, maybe that also applies to the topic of today, sexual violence. This year, the consortium has a topic. We normally have a year topic, so a topic that we devote our activities to during the year. And this year, the main topic is colonization and decolonization. Colonization of people, colonization of the earth. And well, I think when we talk about sexual violence, that has something to do, at least from my understanding, with power, oppression, exploitation. So I think this webinar on sexual violence really fits to the topic that we chose today, colonization and decolonization. Just to make a few comments, but I think that the speakers of today will go much deeper into that. What strikes me in the invitation, at least in the title of the invitation, that's the title reads Sexual Violence and Religious Communities, not in religious communities. But as Jus already said, it is also about sexual violence in religious communities. And what strikes me also in the invitation is that it looks at law, the intervention of law, it looks at the intervention of government. But what about the religious communities themselves? And maybe that is a striking difference between Netherlands and Indonesia during the years. We talk about gender issues, we talk about education. Maybe that is a difference between Netherlands and Indonesia. That's in the Netherlands, thinking about a separation between religion and state, although we don't have a strict separation between religion and state. But from the perspective of the state or the government, these issues within religious communities, of course, have to be dealt with within the religious communities themselves, unless, of course, legal issues are involved. But I think Anke Bisshops is in a much better position to talk about that. But that is something that throughout the years we learned that from an Indonesian perspective, when those issues occur, people in Indonesia tend to look at the government. The government should do something about it. Whereas in the Netherlands, we say, well, this is primarily an issue that we have to solve within the religious communities, of course, unless legal boundaries are crossed. Well, from my perspective, I think the Dutch religious communities, mainly churches, by the way, I'm not so familiar with the sexual violence within Muslim communities in the Netherlands. But to my understanding, the religious communities did take their responsibility. Well, maybe we can say too late, too little. Once again, Anke Bisshops is in a much better position to talk about that. But I think, yeah, from my understanding, I think the religious communities did what they could do. And well, maybe this is an issue that we really can share and that we can learn about from the Netherlands, Indonesia perspective. Well, I leave it at that. I wish all of us a very fruitful webinar and discussion. And I give the floor to the moderator.
Thank you, Frans. Thank you for your motivating words to us. And good morning, all friends in the Netherlands, and good afternoon, all friends in Indonesia. Welcome to this worthwhile webinar. It is my pleasure to welcome you all. I'm Elina Welmiria Otto. You can call me Elina. I'm here as the moderator of this webinar, and I'm a pastor of Protestant Evangelical Church in Timor, Gereja Masehi Injili di Timor, and I'm attending this event as the representative of East Indonesia Women's Network, Jaringan Perempuan Indonesia Timur. For your information, this is an annual webinar organized by the Gender Working Group of the Netherlands Indonesia Consortium for Muslim-Christian Relations, or NICMCR. And I think we have to appreciate some friends working behind the scene, June Beck, Christine Hutubesi, Yus, and other friends. Today's webinar will be focusing on the theme sexual violence and religious communities. As we know that religious communities are expected to become safe places to live and grow. However, the realities are not always the same with our hope and vision. That's why we gather here to discuss more on why sexual violence happens within religious communities, how to respond to the cases, and how to prevent our communities from such crime. So today, we are lucky to have two speakers. The first one is Dr. Anke Bisshops. I'm sorry if I spell your name wrong. Maybe Dr. Anke, is it right?
Yeah, very good.
Thank you. She is from Tilburg University. And then the second speaker is Dr. Nina Nurmila from the State Islamic University of Sunan Gunung Jati, Bandung. Both of them will deliver their topics, and Dr. Anke will talk from the perspective of Christianity, and Dr. Nina Nurmila will speak from Islamic perspective. So now, yeah.
Elina, sorry for restart.
Yeah.
Because Prof. Nina announced to us that she will leave our meeting around 3:20. So maybe better if Prof. Nina will start first. Is it okay, Dr. Anke?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and maybe after the session from Prof. Nina, maybe directly to the question and answer from the floor. Is it okay? Because 3:20 she will left. Is it right? Yeah, Prof. Nina?
Yes.
Okay, Prof. Nina, are you there with us?
I think she walked away. She'll be back soon.
Okay. Oke, Ibu Nina, apakah bersama dengan kami? Oke, yeah, because it's already for 13, 3:13, maybe Dr. Anke will start first because it's it's kind confusing right now, but it's okay. How about it, Mbak Yus?
Should I speak
Yeah, oh yeah,
the first
yeah,
or the second?
yeah, it's
Sorry.
Prof Nina already here. Prof
Yes.
Nina, because you will left our meeting is 3:20.
Okay. So what should I do? I mean, should I speak first now or the second? I have
Uh,
already out of my meeting.
Oh, okay, okay. So that it's okay if you are in the second.
Yes. Yes. I'm okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So that's Dr. Anke will start first. Thank you,
Yes. Yes.
Prof
Yep.
Nina.
Yep. Yep. Please.
Okay, thank you, Christine. And without further ado, I think we will get start our presentation from the first speaker, Dr. Anke. Please introduce to us a little bit about yourself and why, I mean, your experience in dealing with this topic, and then you can, and the rest of the time is yours. Please.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for having me. It's interesting to meet people from another culture around this very important topic. Let me see, I'm gonna remove myself from view. That's a bit too much. Yeah, I'm a pastoral psychologist and psychotherapist. I have my own practice, but for all my working life, I've been teaching and working at theological faculties in the Netherlands, Roman Catholic theology. And on big part of my working life, somehow I have been involved in the issue of sexual abuse. I notice you speak about sexual violence. Violence might give the impression that only if physical violence is used, then you should speak about sexual abuse, sexual violence. But abuse is a much more subtle word. But we'll get into that later. So what I want to do is I would like to speak to you about the growing awareness about sexual abuse, about abuse in general, physical, emotional, psychological. And I want to speak about that in a way that I go with you through the history of how I got involved in the issue and how it happened in the Netherlands. So let's go back to the 90s. So that's about 30 years ago. There was a growing awareness in Western world that the power imbalance between people could really confuse whether or not a relationship was voluntary or whether or not it was some kind of power play. So until then, when a doctor had a relationship with a patient, yeah, okay, it can happen. Teacher with a student, not so good, maybe because of the age difference. But we started to become aware that the patient, the client, the student is not so free to say no to advances of the one who has power over them. So when you feel dependent upon another person, it's very difficult to say no because they might retaliate. So that kind of shift became more and more into the public awareness. And around that same time in the Netherlands, we had the situation that a few women were having sexual relationships with a priest. And you may know that priests in the Catholic Church, they're not supposed to have, they have the vow of chastity. They cannot have relationships. So, and then these relationships stopped, and the women, they kind of said this was wrong. And of course, what happens, and I'm sure in Indonesia is absolutely the same thing. The image of the institution of the church in this situation is so important. So everything is done just to preserve the positive image of the institution. But we had the media, and I heard from, I think from Just, that the media in Indonesia also, they are the ones who can play a very important role. But those people who are never listened to, who are not taken seriously, when the media, when they smell a scandal, they want to come into action. And that, of course, it has its negative sides, but it's the positive thing is that people who don't have a voice, who are not taken seriously, are getting a voice. So what did the leadership of the Roman Catholic Church do? Besides trying to save their image, they instituted a foundation called Help and Justice. I was asked to take part in that foundation. And what we did in the beginning mainly was study, how can this happen? How often does it happen? What can you do to, in the sense of prevention? Of course, what we did, we looked to the United States because they were ahead of us in this sense. And we discovered that this kind of abuse, really abuse of power, happens much, much more than we ever thought. And yeah, this is the situation in the world right now, really, is that I'm distracted. I'm seeing myself. Okay, I'm gone again. I want to see you. I don't want to see my face big on the screen. That the image of the situation, plus our tendency to look away from things that are negative, really is difficult, because racism, Black Lives Matter, Me Too, you know, the sexual abuse scandals all over the world in that are now the south of Europe, is the things are coming to the light. So that's a whole growing awareness. And one very important part is the power of the perpetrators. I read in the handout by Professor Nina that you have directors of boarding schools who abused children, who raped girls. In the Netherlands, priests were really very high on a pedestal, and they were kind of above everybody. They were supposed to be like God's representation on earth. So they got away with everything. And the media, they, again, when in around 2010, so about 12 years ago, the media again gave a lot of attention to men who were abused. Now you need to know about the situation in the Netherlands. We had boarding schools for young boys who wanted to become a priest, and they were led with all male staff. We also had boarding schools for girls with religious nuns, led by religious nuns, but there were no men in these schools, hardly any. Maybe the priest did the weekly service. So what happened was that in these boarding schools with young boys and priests, religious people, there was quite a bit of abuse. And it happened so that in one congregation, there was really a lot of abuse. And the victims of that institution there, they got together. And you know, when you come together, you get power. And they kind of kept trying to talk to the religious superiors and to the leadership. And they were helped by the media again. And so finally, the leadership had to do something because the scandal got bigger and bigger. And so the bishops, the leadership of the church, they had an independent inquiry done, which of course is very important. You have to have the facts, what goes on really. And and in this, it was a very big inquiry with all kind of scientists, historians, psychologists, psychiatrists, sociologists. And this group of investigators, they also wanted to help the victims. And it turned out that the victims, well, you know, for example, in Ireland, they got a lot of money. In the States, they really got a lot of money. But that money doesn't help victims. And so the leader of this investigative committee asked me to help the religious leaders to deal with the victims in a good way. So that's where I got involved again. And yeah, that was really a very difficult situation because, you know, in those days, people still tended to think, well, because these were men that were abused around, well, sometimes half a century ago, or at least decades ago. So, and the common idea in the Netherlands was, well, are these guys still not over what happened to them when they were a child? So we didn't understand the impact of sexual being used as an object. It is devastating. It ruins people's trust in other people, people's trust in religion, in God. It ruins the capacity to interact in a emotionally healthy way with other people. It impacts the possibility to keep a job. So these people were, yeah, all were more or less damaged. And when they got to talk to the religious representative of the one who abused them, or maybe even the one that abused them, but most of them were dead by then, they were not the nicest people. They were sometimes really uncivil or aggressive, or and so the religious superior would say to me, I cannot speak to that man. First he has to behave. I'm not going to speak to him. So he's on his own. And then I had to explain to the religious superior, you are the fact that he is not very civil. Which is a result of the abuse. You are using that against him now. That's just unacceptable. These people are in pain. They never learned, some of them never really learned how to communicate in a balanced way. So you just have to deal with it. You cannot use that against them. So anyway, so I helped people to have empathy with the victims. And of course, it was not only a lack of empathy, and there was also a very strong tendency to protect the own group, to protect the image. And that's always, you know, we're all human, it's very understandable, but they, yeah, almost all of the religious superiors that I helped to come to some kind of agreement with the victims, they grew in their understanding of the impact of what had really happened. So that was very important. And they also grew in their or their need to have a to preserve the image of the group. That also lessens. But it was quite difficult to really get to the bottom of what had happened, because there were so many questions. Why did the victims not speak up before? Why did they wait so long to speak about this? Well, there you have this very important of shame. People feel so ashamed about what happened to them. And we all know when a child is being abused, or the tendency of us humans is almost always to think, I'm to blame. This happens to me because there's something wrong with me. And if people know that this happened to me, nobody will want to have anything to do with me. So shame is a very important part. And of course, in those times, children, if a child had the audacity to speak about it, they were not believed. It was just unthinkable that a priest could do such perverted things. So they weren't believed. So yeah, this is a little bit the history in the Netherlands, and we had kind of we developed a kind of a procedure in which, depending on how severe the abuse was, you got such and so much money. But as I said before, the money is not what's going to heal. What healed, in as far as healing is possible after having had this happen to you as a child, was the empathy of the representative of the perpetrator. If a victim, so we tried to get, we had group meetings with victims, but there was also kind of a mediation where the one victim could speak to the perpetrator or to the representative of the perpetrator. And if the victim saw in the eyes of the other person the shock and the sadness and the empathy about what they had endured, that helped. I did a study about the procedure in the Netherlands. I compared it with the procedure in especially Ireland. And in Ireland, there was a totally legal procedure. So you had to put it on paper, and you had to send in your complaints, and you had to detail what happened to you. And then there was this committee that decided, well, you are going to be awarded so and so much euros. Money. Yeah, it's a kind of recognition, but yeah, it doesn't impact our heart. It's just a financial thing. So it's very important, and that's one thing I would like to hope to bring across to you, that having attention for the victims is so important. We always tend to look at the legal procedures, okay, we have to punish the perpetrators more. I mean, look at all the crimes and criminal activities of people around the world. The amount of years that are connected to a specific crime, it doesn't stop people. I mean, if that would really, yeah, it does stop a little bit, but most crimes are just, if people think I can get away with it, and they often think they can, they will do it. Doesn't matter how much punishment they might suffer. So there are two legal things that are really important. In the Netherlands, we changed the statute of limitations. So before, I think it was about 10 years after the crime, you could still file a complaint. But a child that has been abused, usually it's only after 40, when they are 40 years or older, because we tend to suppress and push away all the negative experiences. And when you're around 40 and older, it doesn't work very well. So maybe 30 years after being abused, you realize how it impacted you. So then you want to file a complaint, and then the statute of limitations is gone, is passed. So we changed that, and that's very important, especially when abuse or violence against children is involved. And the other thing is the obligation to report any abuse in any institution. That is also quite important, so that you know, I'm hearing all kind of noises. Linda, can you mute yourself? It is very important that any institution, university, mosque, community organization, if they find out about sexual abuse against children, it should be reported, no matter how. But all the other legal activities, I'm not sure whether that would do much. So let me see, how much time do I have? Oh, I'm already over time. I would have liked to speak a little bit about prevention. But maybe that can come after with the Q&A. Okay?
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Anke.
Yeah.
Dr. Anke underlined the existence of the power imbalance that causes sexual violence. The perpetrators have power to abuse weak people, especially women and children. They gain power from their positions as priests or people who are respected in religious circles. While discussing examples of sexual violence within Catholic churches and schools, Dr. Anke finds tensions between, for example, like on the one hand, people think they have to protect the honor of the institutions. But on the other hand, they have to face the demands of the media to expose the cases. And sometimes the stories of the victims are not believed because the perpetrators are people who have power in religious communities. And Dr. Anke also emphasized the importance of restorative justice by giving attentions and help to the victims to heal their trauma, not only seeking legal punishment. I think that's the summary of your presentation, Dr. Anke. And then we will move to the second speaker, The second speaker today is Professor Nina Nurmila. She is a professor of Islamic Studies and Gender at the State Islamic University of Sunan Gunung Jati, Bandung, and now has additional duties as the Dean of the Faculty of Education, International Islamic University of Indonesia. Her doctorate in Islamic Studies and Gender was obtained from the University of Melbourne. Her master's degree was pursued in Gender and Development Studies from Murdoch University, Western Australia. Professor Nina, I'll give time to you about 20 minutes. You may introduce yourself and what is your role in stopping sexual violence. I mean, your experience about that, and then please give your presentation.
Good afternoon for Indonesian, and then good morning for those of you who are in the Netherlands. Thank you very much for the invitation. I would like to share my screen, but please give me access to share my screen, and while waiting to have access, thank you very much also for Frans who have opened this session, and then for Elina, the moderator, and then the first speaker, Dr. Anke, and then also you, Sadia, who have invited me for this session. Okay, I have already have access. Thank you very much. So this is my presentation. I would like to have the title, Sexual Violence in Religious Educational Institutions. I would like to firstly highlight the idealities. Yeah, I think all religions have a standard of morality, and of course against the sexual violence. Yeah, but the problem is that there is someone who misuse and abuse the power. Like Dr. Anke mentioned that the position of the priest is like very high above the human being. It's like the representation of God, yeah, and therefore this can lead someone who misuse the authority, yeah, and hide the immorality or the crime against humanity behind the very noble position, yeah. So in Islam, in Islamic tradition, sexual violence is prohibited. This is expressed in one of the Quranic verse which prohibit, for example, because in the time of the revelation there is still slavery, so the honor of the slave is being prohibited to force the slaves, if they want to protect their chastity, not to force them to become prostitutes. So that's one of the proof that Islam is anti-sexual violence. Yeah, and also within the marriage, because sexual violence can happen both outside and inside the marriage. The Quran asks the husband to treat the wife well, yeah, and prohibit to treat the wife badly. And in fact, unfortunately, the opposite of the idealities in Islam, which is against sexual violence, unfortunately, some people hide the immorality, the crime behind the great position, yeah. For example, the case of the perpetrator of Harry Wirawan, I mentioned the name because it is already circulated in the news. Yeah, he is the teacher and the head of the Islamic boarding school in Bandung and raped 13 underage students, and actually might be more. Yeah, and 8 of them were pregnant to the 9 babies. Yeah. And the case was being known when one mother noticed strange thing in her daughter, and then finally the mother found out that her girls is pregnant. So that's why she reported the case to the police, and then the police did investigate the boarding school. And the boarding schools, it consists of most of the students live there in the dormitory for free because they come from a poor family, and then some of them are orphans, and then most of the victims, the 13 victims started to live in the dormitory beginning 2016 and rely financially and educationally, and are being asked to obey the teacher when they are being forced to have sexual relationship with the perpetrator. And the perpetrator has been sentenced to life sentence, but then it has been increased to the death penalty, but up until now it is not being executed yet. And in addition to the death penalty, all his assets were taken to pay restitution for the 13 victims, but it's only like 300 million. It is stated that this restitution is to support the education of the victims until they reach they mature age. But I think 300 million is not much money for 13 people to pay their education because of the expensive living cost. Yeah. And 9 victims were also being taken care by the West Java government. So previously, all the restitution being given to the government, but this is being revised because if all the financial responsibility being given to the government, this will make a bad situation for the perpetrator to, okay, nothing happened with all my belongings. And it was reported in the Republika on the 20th of April during the Ramadan when Heri Wirawan was in jail, that he worshipped diligently and behave nicely. This is the problem with how people worship God and pray regularly, but he still do something immoral. Yeah. So this is in Islam. Actually, the concept is that in the salat tanha anil fahsya'i wal munkar, that the prayer should make someone prevent themselves from doing something immoral or something bad, but this has no effect. Yeah, for Heri Wirawan, who pray but he raped his own students. Yeah. And it is another example. Other example might exist, yeah, in the Islamic boarding school in Jombang, which is the perpetrator was the son of the head of Islamic boarding school, and there has been like long time before this perpetrator can be sentenced to jail, yeah, because there is effort from the Islamic boarding school to hide the case and then to protect the perpetrator. Yeah, and he has been jailed for 12 years. And this is based on our criminal code, KUHP, Kitab Undang-Undang Hukum Pidana, which in the article 285. It is stated that anyone who has, who commit sexual violence by forcing the woman to have sexual intercourse outside marriage, and the person is being sentenced for rape and being jailed for 12 years. So the perpetrator has been in jail. Yeah. And then also he was sentenced based on KUHP, the criminal code, article 294, that anybody who has a sexual violence, especially in the article 2E, because the person is included as in the boarding school, yeah, the teacher who did the sexual violence in the place where the education is going on. Yeah. Actually, in the new law, our new law, the anti-sexual violence bill, it is stated that for the teacher or the head of Islamic institution or whatever roles of educators, the penalty is being added 1/3 of the punishment. So if the person is being punished for 10 years, then the person will have additional 1/3 of 1/3 of 10 is like 3.5 more years, yeah, for the punishment, because actually the person should protect the children, yeah, but the person violate this responsibility. And what are the causes of sexual violence? Yeah, here I highlight that patriarchal ideology, which puts women in subordinate position, are expected that women serve the men biological needs. And the second is unequal power relation, like teacher to students and our priest to the people, because the priest has too high position. And in Muslim communities, like the kiai is the head of the Islamic boarding school, is capable of using that power. Yeah, there is another case in the pesantren, for example, when the kiai, the head of the Islamic boarding school, commit sexual violence by, for example, making the student gather in in one place, and during the recitation of the prayer, the kiai will invite several students to his room, and then louder the recitation of prayer, then the kiai rap one by one of the students, yeah. And then the misuse and abuse of religion. I think this is not new. If we look at the history of Europe, how secularization occurred, that's because of the abuse of and misuse of the religion, yeah, in order to oppress the ordinary people, yeah. And how to prevent and handle sexual violence? Yes, I think national law or criminal code, like the KUHP, criminal code, and then the new law, 2022 sexual violence criminal code, undang-undang tindak pidana kekerasan seksual. I think it's very important. So at the moment, the process is women activists together with the relevant ministries drafting the government regulation in order to implement this law, yeah, from the prevention into the handling. And it is very important to have this law. And we, in the process of having the sexual violence criminal law, because this law is it was very difficult to enact this bill, and after very long struggles, and then we can have this law enacted. So there's our success, but there are still many steps to go. Yeah, like drafting the government regulation, making socialization. Yeah, but in between that time before this law being enacted, because we were pessimistic about whether we can enact this law, we were struggling in the Ministry of Religious Affairs and then the Ministry of Educational and Culture to have regulation enacted in campus. But this kind of regulation to prevent and to handle sexual violence is not enacted yet in the pesantren or in Islamic boarding school. I think it's very important that in all level of education we have like a code of conduct or the specific regulation to prevent and handle sexual violence. Yeah, but it is good that we have already enacted the SKDirjen, that's the Director General's regulation, which is enacted by which was socialized and enacted in 2019, at that time, I was one of the commissioner at the Komnas Perempuan, the National Commission of Anti-Violence Against Women. So we were glad that we can push the Ministry of Religious Affairs to issue this regulation, which is now there are 25 of the Islamic higher educational institution to have the rector regulation in preventing and handling sexual violence. And I think with this kind of regulation, there is a shift in attitude that the campus previously tend to hide the cases of sexual violence, because there is no clear regulation, no clear procedure for the victims to report the cases. But after this regulation, there has been changing attitude that because there is clear institution to report, how to report. So this shows the campus position in pro-victim, rather than a pro-perpetrator. When the campus doesn't have any regulation, this can show that the campus doesn't have any pro-victim position, yeah. And it is important for also to have education. I think this kind of seminar in giving what is sexual violence to the students. Yeah, I did it many times in several campus. I think it's very important that students are aware there is a possibility that the misuse of authority, like the staff or the lecturers, to take advantage of their position over the students. Yeah. And of course, we also need to change patriarchal mindset, because one of the causes of sexual violence is patriarchal culture, which tend to reduce the humanity of the women only to sexual object, yeah, sexual being. Yeah. And okay, this one I have already explained it, that before the regulation, if there is any cases, campus tend to hide the cases in order to protect the good name of the campus. Yeah, and this is this kind of attitude is beneficial and very helpful for the perpetrator to have so many victims being but not being punished. Yeah. But after the regulation, the campus already has a hotline, what number, or how to report the cases. Yeah, and when the victims report the cases, of course, the campus need to heal physical or emotional trauma, and the perpetrator must be punished. And this kind of regulation, I think, must be imposed also to Islamic boarding school, yeah, as a religious institution. And because I work as the lecturer at the Islamic institution, yeah, the topic of this seminar today is also in sexual violence in religious institutions. So it is good that if we can socialize the regulation throughout Indonesia, not only state Islamic university, but also the private Islamic university. And of course, the perpetrators must be punished. And in the regulation of campus also, there is a punishment like light punishment by sending letters, or it is mid punishment, like by preventing them to increase the position from, for example, from lecturer into assistant professor, yeah, or it is being punished by being stopped from working in the institution, yeah, because it will be very dangerous for the students to have Islamic lectures who have who have the tendency of doing sexual violence. Yeah, and by having this regulation both in the Ministry of Religious Affairs and in campus under the Ministry of Education and Culture, when campus avoid to have this kind of regulation, this means we can label this campus to be perpetrator. Yeah, I think there has been changing attitude during the process. Okay, this is my final slide. So I think I agree with Dr. Anke that we should trust and support the victims. Even we need to be proactive in investigating suspicious cases, because usually when we become the victim, it is frozen. Yeah, like we cannot think well. So other people should intervene when there is sexual violence happening, and to do something, yeah, to help the victims. And for Indonesian, let's support the implementation of the 2022 sexual violence criminal law, which at the moment women activists together with the relevant ministry drafted the government regulation to implement this law. And I believe that this law can change many things, yeah, because there are so many specialties of the sexual violence criminal law, yeah. And this law can transform the society attitude toward the cases of sexual violence if it is implemented properly, because it is grounded on the women's experience, and it is pro women. For example, usually if there is a cases of rape and the victim report the rape, so this I'm explaining about the different that can be beat by the implementation of 2022 sexual violence criminal law. Previously, if someone who were being raped, when they report to the police, there is no special place of reporting. Yeah, but this new law, it should be like in the separate room, and then it is being recorded. So after the recording, the victims are free from being invited to the hearings, yeah, because the obligation of the state after the victim report the cases is to make the victim recover physically and emotionally. And if the judge want to have a testimony from the victims, the judge can listen to the report recorded from the victims. And it is the police who need to look for the proof that sexual violence is happening. Yeah? And another thing is that the report of the victim is the witness itself. Yeah, the proof in itself. Yeah, not the victim not being burdened. Yeah, to look for the proof in order the perpetrator can be punished. I think that's all from me. I think I am okay with my 20 minutes. Thank you very much. Okay, good.
Thank you very much, Professor Nina Nurmila, for your presentation. Professor Nina Nurmila started from the ideal values in Islamic traditions. She quote 2 verses of Quran that prohibit sexual violence. Professor Nina also mentions a number of rapes and sexual harassments at Islamic boarding schools, and how perpetrators use their financial power and financial status to commit violence against poor children and the orphans who studied there. She mentioned several contributing factors that cause sexual violence to happen, including patriarchal ideology, unequal power relations between teachers and students, the misuse and abuse of religions. And Professor Nina also mentioned several articles in of the national law, KUHP, in giving punishment to the perpetrators. Professor Nina also called us for the preventive ways through the law enforcement, on campus regulation, living patriarchal thinking, education, and then Professor Nina invites all of us to support the implementation of the 2022 sexual violence criminal law And on the top of all, we should trust and support the victims, or we should pro-victims. Thank you very much, Professor Nina Nurmila. And now, without further ado, it's time for us for the question and answer session. I'm looking at the chat box. There are some questions are already there. Okay, so maybe I'm asking for help from Bakyus and Kak Christine to help me look at the questions.
Yeah, I think I can read myself the question.
Okay, sure, please.
So,
And Dr. Anke, there are some questions already in the chat box.
so do you want me to answer first or Dr. Anke first?
I think we go first with Dr. Anke, please.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, I read the question. Is there a mechanism or procedure that would enable the victim to easily report it, either anonymously or publicly? Or are there ways to facilitate and motivate victims to come forward? Well, thank you for the question. It's a very important question. There are several things I can say about that. First of all, it's a very common thing that victims, they don't want to let other people know that this awful thing happened to them. So, and it's very important that people can find other people. You know, we like, it's not a self-help group, but it's a group of people who have experienced the same thing. So that strength in numbers helps you find justice somehow. And if there are other people who have experienced the same thing that you experienced, that really helps you to feel, oh, I'm not the only one who was so bad that this happened to her. So that's the one thing that I would always advise people: find people who were in the same situation, and in talking to each other, you can relax and heal. Another thing is, in the Netherlands, you know, there's a whole development. It's really a growing in consciousness. So since a couple of years, we have a national center for sexual violence. So anybody who has had any experiences like that, they can go there. They can even, you know, report anonymously and get some advice. So that's in a big national scale. Another thing is that nowadays, it's just recently, every institution, churches also, are obliged to have a confidential advisor. Now, I myself am a confidential advisor at the University of Tilburg, and people can report acts of violence or anything. They can report it to a confidential advisor, and the confidential advisor will try and help the person to do the next thing that might help them. And people can report anonymously also. The most important thing to help people to come forward is openness about things. I know in my family something happened that really should not have happened. And I'm open I don't pronounce it. I mean, but if it's appropriate, I remember one time speaking to a pretty large group, and I spoke about that. It happened in my family too. It's not something to be ashamed of. So the more people are open about what happened to them, and the more understanding and empathic the society in general is towards victims, the more easy it is to come forward with with your own awful things that happen to you. So yeah, that's would be my answer to that question. I hope that is an answer where the person, I don't know, was it Yus or who answered this? Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anke. I think the idea of having confidential advisor is very great, beside the hotline numbers that maybe people can call and report the acts of violence. Thank you. And then Professor Nina, maybe do you want to answer the questions?
Yes, there are a lot of questions. I would like to read and then answer one by one. I would like to firstly answer from the question from Nur Mentari about the death penalty, whether the death penalty is against human rights. Yes, yeah, I agree with you. Komnas Perempuan. I was one of the commissioner of Komnas Perempuan, and we are in the position that death penalty is against human rights. The problem is that not all the judges agree with this, that this is violating human rights. Yeah, and then the second is from Kisti. Kisti, okay. I would like to read your question. This is about that I'm sure both countries have regulation regarding sexual abuse, but as in the Netherlands, some of the perpetrators in Indonesia slow get away with it. As a human or a religious woman who is also powerless, is there any way to prevent sexual violence, sexual abuse, and or help the victims? Because in some cases, our voice really has no impact. Yeah, I think there are so many cases of victims of sexual violence who cannot report their cases, so they are just do not know where to go and very powerless. That's why it's important to have the institution which can provide or being pendamping korban, yeah. And there are some of these kind of institutions such as Rifka Anissa in Jogja, and then Puan Amal Hayati, and then Balkis. And in Indonesia, there is a change of forum which can provide help to the victim in order to raise their voice. It is called Forum Pengada Layanan, yeah. And this Forum Pengada Layanan who actually initiated to have the anti-sexual violence bill, which is enacted in 2022, yeah, because based on their experiences of helping the victim, and they have no help because the law, the existing law, the KUHP only protect two types of sexual violence, which is the rape and then pencabulan, sexual molestation. And the definition of rape itself is very limited to the penetration of penis to the vagina. Then they were struggling to have, in order the law acknowledge many more types of sexual violence. So this is good sign that this forum is established, and it is important also for the government to support this forum, because they mostly independent, and this is from grassroots, some of them being supported by foreign financial aid. Yeah. Okay. And I still remember that only 35% of the cases that can be brought into the court. Yeah, many of the cases cannot be brought to justice in the court because usually the perpetrator persuade the victims, in order to avoid punishment. Yeah. And sometimes when the victims cannot be persuaded to stop the cases, the terror comes from the perpetrators. Yeah, some victims are very powerless. That's why the strong law and then the institution which can help the victims need to be more, to have more in Indonesia, for example. And then from Pino, Pino asks, is it Pino from the Komnas Perempuan also? I don't know. Where is Pino? Did you work in Komnas Perempuan before? And Pino asks about the dalil nakli. Dalil nakli is the Quranic verses, which can be used to be against sexual violence. I actually the verses that I mentioned about the prohibition to this one, the prohibition to force the slave in order not to be a prostitute. This can be the basis of that Islam is anti-sexual violence, because this one is hamba sahaya. Hamba sahaya means the slaves. The slave has no power at all. The power is in the hand of the owner. It is the same. It's almost the same power relationship with, for example, teacher to the student, for example. So that's the dalil nakli, the Quranic verses that you can use to be against sexual violence. That's An-Nur 33. And then Nur Mentari, about the importance of special lesson for the officials. I think when you read the anti-sexual violence bill in the there will be a lot of trainings to be done, for the implementation of the law, and I believe that the 2022 anti-sexual violence bill can transform our society, because this is actually grounded from human experience, using feminist perspectives. So it will be transformative in its implementation, but we are just about to start drafting this government regulation. And then from Erlina, I was writing, Erlina mentioned that she identified one of the causes of sexual violence is because the perpetrator is not being punished properly. I can agree with you. This is about the implementation of the law. The law actually provide the articles which should punish the perpetrator, but the problem is the implementation of its law itself. The law can help, but implementation of the law is very important. In order, the implementation is just as we expect. Okay, is there any more question? It is from Lauren, but I still need time to read the question. Maybe we can give time to Dr. Anke first to answer some of the question while I'm reading another question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Nina. And Dr. Anke, there is a question left from Erlina Pardede. She said that she just want to share with us that there is no fair way to solve cases of sexual abuse in the church only by reconciliation or transferring the perpetrators to another area and without legal process. It is not because we do not have the law, but only because most of the perpetrators are persons who are very holy and respective. So what should we do with this condition, and how the church can accompany the victims or survivors to deal with this condition. Please, Dr. Anke.
Yeah, that's an important question. It really illustrates how narrow the law is, or how limited the impact of the law is if the society is not ready for it. If society is still very patriarchal, still very people in power are still getting away with stuff, even according to law they shouldn't. Yeah, so that's very, I keep saying it's a matter of a growing awareness, growing consciousness in society. And I remember there was in I think it was in Mexico, one in a South American country, and there was a priest. He was abusing children, and anybody who wanted to speak about it was kind of ostracized. That's not possible. You go away, and they were considered bad. And then there was, I think it was a young man. One time he took his telephone, his camera, and he, through the curtains, he phoned what the priest, he filmed what the priest was doing, and he gave it to journalists. Wow, that had an impact. Nobody could still deny it. And yeah, but it's a slow process, and having put the law in proper position is important, but then getting the people to understand the impact, because Professor Nina was speaking about the dehumanization of women. Perpetrators, they are not all really bad people. I mean, we're all children of God and doing our best. They don't even think. I mean, the way we treated animals and still treat animals, there will be a time when we will be unable to understand how we could be so unempathetic with animals. So it's the same lack of empathy with women or people of minorities. I mean, we're talking really about discrimination of people who are poor, have the wrong race, have the wrong religion, have the wrong sex, have the wrong gender. So yeah, helping people to understand the view of the victim is very important. And I really, there was a question by Linda, and I think I'm going to answer it just in a few sentences because we are running out of time. She says how to prevent. Another important way is education. You know, the priests that did these terrible things to children in the Roman Catholic Church, they were really confused people. They were emotionally immature. They didn't know themselves. So if we can manage to help people in their personal and spiritual development, they will not so easily ignore the pain that they're inflicting on other people. So that's what I would have to say.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Anke. And then for Professor Nina, there is another question from Nurmila Aprilia. She said that in our place, law enforcement officers still often blame rape victims, whether it is because of their clothes or their attitude, which is said to invite men to rape them. Is it possible that law enforcement officers also get special lessons for gender-based violence to prevent the situation happen again in the future? Please, Professor Nina.
Yeah, I think I have already answered that questions, that the training need to be done to the law officers, and we need to change the attitude, the negative attitude of blaming the victim, yeah, by having the law, yeah. It doesn't mean that if even the women are naked, it doesn't, I mean, it doesn't mean that there is justification to rape the women. I think I have already answered all the questions because like Nur Mentari is actually only rewritten the question from Pino, yeah, about the Dalil Nakli, and I already answered that. And my apology, I need to leave. So thank you very much for this for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Nina, for all the answers and your presentation. And yeah, and then thank you for all the friends who already give your questions to both Dr. Anke and Professor Nina. I think all
Can
the
I say
questions.
one more thing?
Oh yes, please, Dr. Anke.
I think if we're talking about a change in consciousness, movies or soaps or series on television can be so impactful to understand the perspective of the victim. And I know in the Netherlands, this really has helped. So if in Indonesia, somebody would make a series on television about The Accused, the movie The Accused has had so much impact. A woman with a short skirt, she was raped and she was told, well, you shouldn't have put on those clothes, you shouldn't have danced so sexy. And that movie really explains this mechanism of blaming the victim so good. And it has had an enormous impact. So that's the last thing I really wanted to share with you. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Anke. Yeah, what you said before, it reminds me that the popular culture around us give us so many factors that may give impacts to the sexual violence to happen. Thank you. And then, friends, I think because all the questions have been answered by our speakers today, so before I give the time to either Mbak Kyus or Kak Christine, I would say that the perpetrators of sexual violence can be around us and wearing religious masks. So we should stay alert, don't hesitate to report cases of violence around us, and let us strive for trauma healing for the victims and survivors. That's all today's presentations. Thank you very much for joining us in this meaningful webinar. And then the rest of the time I'll be giving to Mbak Yus or Kak Christine if there is some announcement for us, please.
May I leave now? Sorry for this. Thank you very much. Okay, have a good day. Thank you. Thank you.
Prof. I will reach you later.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, Prof. Nina.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody. We don't have any announcement except the summary will be posted in on our website. And then I will ask Ibu Nina, because I haven't really discussed it with her, whether the recording, we can use it for our website as well. And thank you, everybody, for coming. And please stay around, hang around if you wish to do. We are still here until 12 o'clock. And we want to chat with this very informal setting for everybody to just stay around. And for those of you who wish to leave, it's also thank you for coming, and then inshallah see you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Anke. That was wonderful about the last movie or in the soap. Because in Indonesia, we love to watch sinetron.
Sorry?
We love to watch a soap,
Yeah.
like a daytime soap or in the evening soap. And then I think that would be strike a chord.
Try to find a film producer.
A film producer to make it. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, good luck and success with everything. Bye-bye.
Thank you. I will reach you later.
Yeah, we
Thank you,
talk.
Anke.
Bye.
Thank you, Dr. Anko.
Thank you.